Book 3. The alien seemed less like a corpse now. His figure was still skeletal, but the glucose solution had brought a faint echo of colour to his skin and the semblance of life to his eyes. Morvril wondered if this was going to make it harder after she had finished her confession, because she knew that she was still going to have to kill him. She met his eyes, knew he saw the truth in her gaze. Her future, his future, all of the futures, or lack of them. The lack of choices. "You've got to understand," she muttered. He nodded. "Go on with your story." She looked away, marshalled her thoughts for a moment, then went on. "I don't know how long I hid in the forest. The sounds of explosions almost deafened me. The ground shook. There was a terrible hot metal-scented wind, and the trees thrashed about like demons. One nearly fell on me. After that it was dark and almost silent, apart from distant rumblings echoing from the hills. The air smelled of burning, and gradually filled with ash and dust, until I found it hard to breathe. At last, a weak grey dawn light began to show through the damaged tree-tops. I found my way back to the farm, staying away from the paths, wading instead through crumpled brush-grass thick with grey dust. My eyes watered, my lungs wheezed. By the time I reached the edge of the forest, I was dizzy and exhausted, and confused enough to carry on walking out into the ashen ground until the heat began to burn the skin above my hooves. Then I realized the farm wasn't there anymore. In fact, I wasn't even at the edge of the forest. The black, smouldering stumps of trees told me that, and the slope of the land was wrong, rising instead of falling. The air was blurred with smoke and dust, and it wavered in the heat, making grey illusions jump in the distance. I began to think that it wasn't just the farm, that the whole world was gone, replaced by this burning plain. I staggered back into the forest. This time, I didn't stop walking until I dropped. When I woke up, I was cold and thirsty. I found a stream and drank, though the water tasted of ash. Then I walked through the dense trees, following the stream up with some idea that it might be better in the hills. Eventually, I came to a path and started to recognize the country. I realized that I was near Daranos, the next village along the white road from Tephalis. There wasn't much ash now, though I could still smell burning. The patches of sky that I could see through the trees were strange, grey and hazy with smoke. But there was some weak sunlight, and it was getting warmer. I began to feel some kind of hope. Perhaps there was a limit to the disaster. When I saw the village, glimpses of sunlit stone through the trees, I felt a surge of joy. But Daranos was dead, of course. You know the story, I expect, without my telling it. The melted stones of the houses, the potholed roads, the chemical reek of alien explosives. You've seen it so many times. But it was new to me then, and these were my people. You have to remember, too, that we were a peaceful race for the most part. Physical conflict was rare. Murder was unheard of. I almost died there in Daranos from the sheer agony of what I saw. Orange insects crawled over dead eyes of the villagers, in and out of dead mouths. Charred bones projected from the remnants of flesh. There wasn't much blood. Most alien weapons burn rather than cut. But there were some who seemed to have been beaten to death, in what I now realize, looking back, can only have been the exercise of gratuitous cruelty. I wandered from house to house, saw the burnt heap of rubble that had been the temple. I thought of Pakip, of Larnaj, and their baby, and I knew for certain then that they too were dead. I didn't know why it had happened. I didn't even really know that there had been an invasion. I simply didn't think of it that way, you see. Everything, since I had seen the vast alien ship appear over Tephalis, was confused in my mind. If someone had asked me whether there was one kind of alien or two, or whether they were attacking us or helping us against some great natural disaster, I couldn't have answered. My mind was paralyzed, unable to reach even the most elementary conclusions about what had happened to my world. Eventually, I found myself walking towards the village well, drawn by the smell of fresh water. I heard a movement, turned, and saw a black carapaced alien walking towards me, the band of plastic that augmented its eyes glowing an uneven red. It was clearly hurt. Its gait was unsteady on its two legs. Its breath rattled in its throat. It must have been injured in the attack on the village. Why it had been left behind by the others, I don't know. My first instinct was to help. As I've said, I really didn't understand what was happening. Even if I had, I don't think I'd have thought any differently. There hadn't yet been time for the outer shock to work its way inside me and change the habits of a lifetime. So I stepped forward and offered to fetch water from the well. I remember thinking that if I helped the alien, perhaps it would be grateful. Perhaps we could talk. Perhaps I could find some way of understanding why the people in Daranos were dead, and what had happened to Tephalis, and to my farm and my family. The black carapaced beast raised a glittering object in its hand and spoke, its voice little more than an animal growl. I couldn't understand the words. It wasn't until much later, when I found out about the combat drugs that the aliens used, that I realized they probably hadn't made sense anyway. Anyway, the alien shot me. But because it was dying, or perhaps because the targeting systems fitted to its eyes were damaged, it missed, burning my legs instead of killing me. Instinctively, I jumped clear. The alien turned the gun round for another shot, and this time the movement was more definite, more controlled. Dying or not, I think it would have killed me the second time. Fortunately, I didn't give it the chance. I jumped forward, kicked out. I only meant to knock the gun out of its hand, but my aim wasn't too good either. In my panic, I killed it. You have to understand how terrible this was for me then. I had killed a living being, terminated the development of a mind. In our culture, nothing justified such a sin. I remember watching the blood leaking from the alien's mouth. I took the eye shield away, saw the dead eyes behind it, with their strange gossamer attachments. For a moment, the light moving along those optic fibres gave me hope. Then I realized they were only machines. All my strength went then. The body chemicals, the natural drugs that had kept me going, desperate to survive in the chaos of the invasion, suddenly deserted me. I had killed. I deserved to die. So I collapsed in the soil and waited to die, shivering, the body of my enemy cooling beside me. Morvril had to stop then. The story was choking her throat, choking her brain. The dark walls of the cell were pressing in on her, as if she were the prisoner and the doctor her captor. She looked at the doctor, who nodded. "I understand," he said gently. "I know why you killed that one." "But why did you kill all of them, after killing one had felt like that?" Morvril closed her eyes, all four of them, and looked away. She couldn't answer. Not yet.